It's hodgepodge time again, kids. And that's got me thinking about painters and trolls and painters who paint trolls and what to do when an army of skeletons attacks you during your tee shot. And I'll tell you all about it on the other side. Hello, you're listening to the John Huff Podcast. Oh, yay. Hey, how you doing, podcast fans? Are you well? Did you survive Black Friday? Did you get a good deal on that brand new state-of-the-art video cassette recorder system that all the kids are talking about these days? Did you get trampled? Did you have to fight your way out of the store, clutching that box like the Christ child to your chest? I saw a really hilarious meme, and what it was a photo of the Black Friday pandemonium at some department store in America. God love you, America. And it was juxtaposed against a painting by the painter Bruegel. Bruegel. You may have heard that name pronounced Bruegel or Bruegel. Apparently, the proper, this would be Dutch pronunciation, is Bruegel. Not easy to say, also makes a mess of your pop filter, okay? Things get a little bit blurry here, all right? Bruegel was Bruegel the Elder. He was, we're talking 1500s here, Dutch, Flemish, possibly Belgian. It depends on how you work it all together. In those days, the lines were somewhat blurred behind with all of those places. And as I understand it, they describe Bruegel. It's hurting my throat saying that. And as somebody with Dutch ancestry, you would think that would come more naturally to my throat. It doesn't. It hurts. Bruegel was this really magnificent painter. And what he specialized in was painting scenes. So if you look at one of his paintings, there are a bunch of Bruegels, by the way. There is the Elder and the Younger, and there was like Jan Bruegel was a brother of the Younger. A whole legacy of painters here, but Peter is the guy. And he specialized in painting these just huge groups of people, like carnivals. He has a funeral procession one, just lots of people and lots of things going on. And I was drawn as a university student to his work because, as we've talked about, I was kind of a lonely guy a lot of the time. Used to listen to AM radio to hear voices, one of the reasons I do this podcast now. And I was drawn to paintings of scenes involving a lot of people. There's a painter called Crystal Kiefer whose work I really like. And she would paint scenes of European cities in like the 1700s, 1800s. I don't know her exact timeline. I just thought of her now again and I haven't looked into it. But it would be scenes, like street scenes of, let's say, Paris and women with parasols, and there'd be a cafe and a lot of people, a lot of stuff going on. And I could kind of immerse myself in that world and feel as though I was interacting with other people. I know it's sad. You don't have to cry for me, Argentina. You don't have to lament. I spent a lot of time alone in university because I was working, I was studying, I was reading. I had so much work to do and stuff to read that I spent a lot of time in my room listening to classical music, drinking a pot of coffee, very pretentious, little foreign cigarettes and a beret. That was me, man. And then I would watch Beavis and Butthead and play Doom on my computer, but that's a whole other thing. So I liked Bruegel's paintings because there was so much happening. Literally hundreds of characters in some of these paintings. of a festival or whatever, and there would just be little stories happening. And you could look at them and you could look for hours. You could watch and look for hours at these paintings and then always find something new and then find some symbolism. And then another thing, there's a dude throwing up over there. There's always a layer of something very sinister in Bruegel's work for me. And if you looked closely, again, there's a dude throwing up. Like there was something a little bit unsettling in some of these street scenes that he would present to you. But I liked it anyways. I liked this notion of just having a bunch of people around, even if one of them was vomiting. So you take this picture of the Black Friday chaos. Black Friday at its worst. Like, it's a department store. There's 200 people and they are coming to blows over a television set. And in this particular case, I don't know what the big deal was. I think it was 2019. I don't know what the hot ticket item was at that point, but they all are carrying this kind of long rectangular box. Might be a TV, not sure. And there's like a dozen of them and people are carrying them and they're falling all over each other. I mean, you hear about people who get trampled to death on Black Friday. I saw another terrific meme that talked about how this is specific to America, but I know that Black Friday has kind of spilled over its borders and you kind of get this everywhere now. But it's like America, the place where people trample each other to death over a television set the day after they say how grateful they are for what they have. Oh, the curious irony. And I don't mean that to bag on America, but the timing is American. Thanksgiving, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, which sounds kinky to me. So it's the worst you can imagine of Black Friday. Just a mob of people being a mob of people trying to get that stuff before the other people get it. Trampling, fighting, just this huge brouhaha, which leads us phonetically to a Bruegel-ha-ha, which is this painting called The Triumph of Death. If you have not seen The Triumph of Death, I heard it described as the most terrifying painting in the history of the world. Not sure it is, haven't seen all the paintings. It's also kind of the first zombie apocalypse painting. And so what's happening is there's this scene in a village. And again, it's the 1500s, it's a late medieval period, I guess. So if you can picture people in kind of medieval costume, and there's a pandemonium happening because the people in this village are being attacked by death and an army of skeletons. Very, very creepy, man. And so you see people just being hacked down or being chased naked by these awful dogs, and death is riding on a skeletal kind of horse, and he's a skeleton. And there's an army of skeletons just hacking down these people, killing people. And the masses are running like rats into this, what looks to be like an open door. This huge door swung up open, and they're crowding into it as fast as they can go, with skeletons biting at their heels. And then you realize, if you look at it from a certain perspective, that this hole they're running into is the entrance to a tomb. On top of it, there's grass and flowers, and then more skeletons, and skeletons lined up here, and skeletons lined up there, and swords. And over by the river, the fish are all dead on the banks, and there's a bloated guy, and there's a guy hiding in a tree, and he's got an arrow in his back. It's an ugly freaking scene, man. When I was a university student, lonely, and drawn to these paintings of a lot of people having a good time, this is not the painting I'm talking about. But I found the juxtaposition really, really hilarious, because what you see in the Bruegel painting is the death of institutions. You can read into it that all of these institutions we have are impermanent, that life itself is impermanent, and that all the things that you hold dear will ultimately fall to the triumph of death, and that everything you make so important and so vital, the stuff that you're willing to live and die for, is so transient. It is so impermanent, and it does not last, and all will die, and all will fall beneath the triumph of death. Juxtapose that against people willing to knock each other the F out over a deal on a smart television set. And doesn't it just say everything? Doesn't it just say everything? This is like an art episode. Suddenly it's turning into. On the weekend I went and I saw the, okay, this is going to take a little more phlegm. The immersive Van Gogh exhibit that is playing here. There's this traveling thing, Van Gogh, better known to you and me as Van Gogh. That's how we say it, but apparently the Dutch pronunciation is Van Gogh. Tough to do, my throat's hurting. I will not get through this episode if I have to keep saying Dutch names. You know what I mean? There's this immersive, I'm going to keep saying Van Gogh now because it's just easier on my throat. What they do is that they take Van Gogh paintings and they got screens all over the room. Screens in the middle, like towering, 15, 20 feet tall ceilings. And there'd be a screen that runs the length of one wall and a screen that runs the length of the other wall. And there'd be like these pillars in the middle upon which they are flashing the images in close-up, in many cases, of Van Gogh paintings. And it's set to classical music or evocative music in some spots. And all you do is you stand in this room and you are surrounded by the brushstrokes of Van Gogh, and you listen to the music, which is loud, and you simply experience this, and the floor is painted. I think the floor is maybe a reflection of Starry Night. I'm not quite sure about that, because it changes with the light as different paintings appear on the screens, right? Very, very interesting, and then you step back, and you'll get a close-up on the brushwork of Van Gogh, and it is so intricate. It is mesmerizing. Now, we know, if you've been listening, we know that I'm an art guy. I have become an art guy. I am fascinated by anybody who can produce visual art because I cannot do it. Even in the abstract, I'm just not inclined that way. I'm a word guy, kids. I paint with words. But I got friends who are incredible artists, and I've become more and more interested in art as a thing. And we do episodes where I talk about the Impressionists or I talk about Cubism. I've become interested in the academics a little bit of art and in painters. And so here we have Van Gogh, and you look at his brushwork and some of these paintings, it is stunning. There'd be a close-up of a person's eye, and there'd be 30 colors in that eye. Just this little piece of a much, much wider canvas. And you focus in, and just the level, the extraordinary level of detail and color and how he combines these things to create an impression of a scene in a field or a portrait, a self-portrait, Starry Night. And I just find his work absolutely extraordinary and his life absolutely extraordinary. When you dig into the nuts and bolts of it, Van Gogh did not live a long life. He was in his late 30s when he killed himself because he struggled throughout his whole life with mental illness, mental health. And so you follow his trajectory. I'm not going to do it for you now, but you see him struggling to find his way in any sort of line of work and bouncing around from place to place to place and falling in love with a prostitute. And then he winds up in an asylum. And it's just this extraordinary life. If you made him a character, the whole thing where he cuts off part of his freaking ear because he was in a kind of a psychotic delusion and a depression. This is a person's real life, okay? This is the sort of thing that you hear of a character in a movie, and you watch the character in the movie and you're like, wow, that's just not really a real life. It is a real life. It's crazy when you read it. I think he was 37 and he shot himself in the chest, I think. And his life was extraordinary. The tragedy in it, the wandering around, the things that happened to him, the cutting off the ear. And at the root of all of that is this painter with exquisite vision, unique talent, And when you look at his brushstrokes and the way that he used color, it is absolutely extraordinary. And then you're immersed in the world of his paintings, which is very, very, very cool and an interesting place to be. And you see it up close and you're like, my goodness, because at a distance, you see a field of flowers and you can recognize that as a field of flowers. But then when they zoom in on it, you see all of the little and sometimes not so little brush strokes. And you realize the focus and the vision and the attention to detail and the depth of field and the way that he made these things happen. His early paintings were not nearly as bright and colorful as what his later and more recognizable paintings became. And you see this evolution of his work into this extraordinary use of palette and color and how he can combine those things to create a vibe, create an atmosphere. Really, really interesting stuff. It's a kind of a companion and an opposite to Bruegel, who puts the same level of detail and intricacy and focus into just creating a lot happening. Again, you sit and look at one of his paintings and you can just do it for days because there's always some new thing to see. And then when you zoom in on that, just the level of detail and symbolism and the inside jokes and the little commentaries that run into each little story that exists within this much, much wider canvas of a day in the life, or of a festival, or of a funeral procession, or of an invasion of zombie death skeletons hacking down all of the temporary, impermanent things that you cling so tightly to when you go to the Black Friday sale. I'm giving myself a mulligan today. This is technically episode 120. In fact, it's the second go at episode 120. This is Tuesday, and I sat down on Manic Monday to record this episode for the first time, and I shouldn't have done that. And I knew I shouldn't have done that. I knew that my headspace was not right to do the recording. Now, I've talked about how I switched my release date to Wednesdays, fundamentally just to give myself an extra day of buffer, in case some editing need to be done or whatever. You know, sometimes you just can't get to it on Monday because, and then you've got that extra day just to provide you a little bit of a time buffer on what is a time-sensitive publication. Well, the other thing is that sometimes you just F it up on Monday and you knew you shouldn't be recording on Monday. And if you're smart and if you're self-aware, you say, haven't got it today. Head is not in the right spot. Fortunately, I've left myself a Tuesday where I can hopefully wake up just a little bit better, just a little more even-keeled, and deliver the podcast. Didn't do that. Thought I could ram it through, and I cannot do that to you, faithful listener. I cannot deliver to you less than the best I can do. And I knew as I sat down that I was just feeling some trepidation. There's stuff going on. I'm realizing that I like to focus. At this moment, life is such that I have several things kind of floating around. Stuff kind of floating around my head. My head's a little bit like a Bruegel painting right now. I got some recording sessions that are coming up. I've got some songs to at least be somewhat familiar with by then. I've made the mistake before of going into a session, having spent hours and hours and hours working out drum parts, learning drum parts, then getting ready to go in on these songs that do not have drum parts and lay them down. And then what invariably happens is they chuck all that and take an utterly different approach. And it feels as though it's time wasted. So you have to kind of walk this fine line between being prepared, but not over-prepared, not under-prepared. And it is a fine line. And so you need to familiarize yourself with the songs, done some charting, done some listening. I'm not there yet. I'm not at the level yet where I feel ready to go in and tackle this stuff. So that sits on me. It weighs on me. And I feel a bit of agitation from that. And then I've taken on what will be a pretty substantial and challenging freelance writing assignment. I got that floating around the ether, working diligently on this podcast. And then there's a gig coming up and another gig coming up. There's just stuff. And I woke up yesterday morning with some of the weight of that stuff crushing me a little bit. Some of the weight of that stuff feeling something like a skeletal zombie army coming to attack my village. You know, if I can extend that metaphor. Gonna use that metaphor forever now. And so it was weighing on my consciousness. I did not have a lot prepared for yesterday. Again, I'm experimenting once again with hodgepodges. Great thing about hodgepodges is that you don't necessarily have to lay a lot of research into them, but you also enter this space not 100% sure you've even got an episode. That can be a little bit challenging. And when you add that to the sort of ethereal challenges, the stuff on the horizon, sitting a little bit heavily on me, the combination of that, plus it's a Monday. Do you have the Mondays? A lot of that stuff was sitting on me. And so when I came into this space to sit down and record the podcast, just didn't feel as though I was on it. And you may be listening to this one and thinking, and today you are? Doing the best I can, kids. I recorded an episode. It was okay. 6 out of 10, maybe 6 out of 10. 5 out of 10, 4.5, 5 out of 10. Let's say 5.5 out of 10 Cyber Monday sale, all right? But it didn't have the vibe that I wanted. Just didn't feel good. Ultimately, it just comes down to didn't feel good. And so then I had that. I had that sitting on top of everything. And what I do is that I go to extremes pretty quickly, all right? I go to existential extremes pretty quickly. So I record a podcast episode that is serviceable, but not great. And immediately, my mind jumps to, why on earth are you doing this? Stop it. It's going nowhere and you suck, man. This is a 49-year-old man talking here, Jack. This stuff gets in your head, gets in your heart, gets in your subconscious, and it stays there and it's powerful. And the good thing is, when you attack yourself that way, you can recognize that it exists. That at least gives you a chance to fend off the skeletons a little bit. Maybe figure out if there's a genie in the bottle somewhere. But that happened, and so on top of all this other agitation, you get me beating myself up for being a lousy podcaster, and by extension, a lousy human being. So I carry that throughout the day on top of everything else. Then I get to pickleball last night. Oh yeah, kids. I've become a pickleball player this year. And I'll tell you, my wife and I won our little city recreational doubles league earlier this year. So hey, got a trophy on my mantelpiece. Become a pickleball player, get to pickleball, play fine, and then run up against a difficult team and lose and play horrendously badly. Horrendously badly. I am not a great pickleball player, but I do well enough, and I know I'm capable of much, much more than I was displaying in that particular match. And I get down on myself so heavily and so freaking quickly, and this is like a challenge. This is the game to me, to not do that to myself, to step back objectively and say, you know what? Hitting a plastic ball with a plastic paddle over a little net. This is not something to be taken seriously, Jack. But again, yeah, you get on your own case, you get mad at yourself, you're not doing as well as you could. Legacy of God knows what. And it just got me down. On top of all this other stuff that was happening, it got to me. And so I got frustrated with myself, I got a little tense with myself, I got angry. And that's stupid, man. This is me talking to me right now. That is stupid and such a waste, because the group that I play pickleball with are my friends. My friends, my wife's friends. It's our social group. We do not play in a league. We have our own social group that plays together. And it's a fun time. And all these people are lovely. And we have a good time. But pickleball is freaking maddening, man. If you've ever played pickleball and then you get into your mind that you have an expectation of doing well, and then you do not meet that expectation, drive you freaking crazy, even though it is a silly game played with a plastic ball and little nets. It happens to everybody, by the way. I am not unique in this scenario. It happens to everybody who plays pickleball, for the most part, who begins to develop an expectation. Do not develop expectations, kids. That's the great lesson today. Accept fun. Just expect fun all the time. So that happened to me, and I got on my own case, and I got frustrated with myself, and I got angry, and I'm like, why are you doing this to yourself, man? Why are you doing this to yourself? You've done a bad podcast episode when you knew you shouldn't have sat down to try. You got mad at yourself at pickleball for stupid stuff. You're getting agitated by all these other things that are happening, seeing them as threats rather than opportunities. And it just adds up to a day where you got to give yourself a mulligan. So I am giving myself a mulligan today. For those of you who do not know what a mulligan is, that's a golf term where you step up to your tee shot. It's on the first hole, can be on any hole, but let's in this scenario say the first hole. And you're stepping up and you set the ball on the tee and you want to set the trajectory for the round. The first shot is going to set the table, set the course, set the trajectory for your whole dang round. So there's a lot riding on that shot, man. And it's the first tee, and it's a beautiful summer afternoon in June. And there's 50 other golfers standing around freaking watching. And so you take out the ball, and you put it on your tee, and you set it in the ground. You set it at the right height. You set your club face against it to make sure that the ball is at the right height. Take a couple of practice swings. Remember Lewis Black's advice. Just remember to breathe through your ass. And then you step up, you pull into the backswing. All these people are watching and you know it. And then an army of skeletons comes running out of the forest just as you swing the club and they attack you and you duff it and you hit the ball 6 feet. Doesn't even make it to the ladies' tees. Or it goes right into the pond in front of the hole. And everybody laughs at you and you fall apart and you play the worst round of your life. Well, the mulligan exists so that you can pretend that shot never happened and put down a new ball and swing away. Got to be careful with that. Got to be careful with the mulligans if there's 50 people waiting on the tee blocks because they'll get mad at you for holding up play. Golfers can get testy, man. I've seen some crazy stuff on golf courses before. I don't even play golf anymore, really, a couple times a year. Seen people get tense and antsy on golf courses, man. It can be a wild ride out there. Also seen some wild rides on golf carts, by the way. Golf can be interesting, but it's an expensive pastime, all right? Today I'm giving myself a mulligan on Monday, a Monday mulligan. So from now on, all of my appointments and all of my days will be one day behind. So bear that in mind because it's Tuesday, but it's Monday for me, all right? I got trolled. I got trolled on TikTok. Yes, kids, I got trolled on TikTok. You know my relationship with TikTok. I do not enjoy TikTok. I do not like being on TikTok. And I question regularly whether I will continue on TikTok, but I was experimenting with types of content. Okay? Because the whole reason I'm there is because I'm trying to draw people to my profile and in turn draw them to the freaking podcast. It's like a loss leader. You got to play this game a little bit, right? So I'm like, what works on TikTok? I do not want to spend time trying to craft pithy viral videos. But I put up a video that talked about my insomnia hack. If you have not listened to last week's episode, I talked about an insomnia hack that I learned on the road, whereby realizing that I can nap just fine in the afternoon, but can't sleep when it comes to bedtime, I realized I could trick my body, trick my mind into thinking I was having a nap at 11:30 at night by keeping all of my street clothes on and not getting under the covers and pretending I was taking a nap. And this actually worked for me in desperate times when I've been on the road in the past. So I did like a 2.5-minute video outlining that strategy and I put it on TikTok. Fine. Nobody cared. Good to know. A couple people on Instagram liked it, so hey, not a complete loss. Then I thought, well, let's try a little bit of football content. World Cup is on right now. We all know that I'm a footy guy. Also sounds kinky, by the way. So I thought, let's do just a quick video about the Canada-Belgium match. Do not let your eyes glaze over if you're not into football. All right, I will not bore you, if that's the case, with the details of my punditry about that match. Put up a thing, talked about how Canada impressed me, and I thought they might win a game in this tournament. And go Canada. All right, I will leave it at that. You can go watch. It's on Instagram as well if you want to see it. A little bit of punditry about where Canada was, because Canada, for a brief minute, was kind of the underdog darling of the tournament after that match against Belgium, because they came out against a legit global football superpower, number 2 ranked team in the world, and took it to them, man. Did not play a defensive game, came out swinging, came out attacking, tons of pace, tons of energy. By everyone's estimation, deserved to beat Belgium. Outplayed them, deserved to win. Did not win, but I talked about that as being encouraging and how impressed I was by that. Fine. A lot of reaction to that, all right? By my standards, a lot of views, a lot of likes, a lot of comments. People enjoy the football content. Who knew? So henceforward, the John Huff podcast will be all about football, just so you know. I put that up there, and then everybody's supportive, everybody agrees, and then there's a dang hater. A troll emerged from the army of skeletons, kids. Not a real one, all right? This was one of these fake trolls. So a username with a bunch of numbers in it, and no profile picture, and then when you click on the profile, no content, all right? No posts associated with this profile. So it wasn't even a real hater, and I don't know if it was a bot, or I don't know if it was one of these people who gets hired to create fake profiles and then just go be a douchebag to people. This exists, all right? And I don't know if it was just an actual douchebag being a douchebag to people, because those exist too. The thing about a lot of these social media platforms is that they reward jerky behavior, all right? What they want ultimately is your time, attention, eyes on the platform. And the way that they do that is that they reward antisocial behavior. Great irony in an entity known as social media. So, angry posts, violent posts, sexually explicit posts, all of these things get boosted by the algorithms. They want you arguing. They want you fighting. Why? Because fighting keeps you on the platform. And so there are companies out there, there are special interests out there, there are just jerks out there whose job it is to sow chaos on social media, spread misinformation, say mean things to people, argue with people, just to keep you on the platform, and to pull you into whatever it is they're doing. And so these bots exist. These fake profiles exist everywhere. Instagram, you see them. Twitter is, by all estimations, a complete anarchy. I'm not on Twitter anymore. I dropped it. My profiles no longer exist. Sounds like they're having a good time over there, though, right now. And they exist on TikTok. And so I got a snarky comment about how I should shut my mouth from anonymous user X. And I thought it was actually kind of funny. It was kind of a funny comment and just kind of stupid and totally out of context. I didn't say anything controversial. But again, some of these profiles exist merely to cause chaos, to pull me into arguing with that person, pull other people into arguing with that person, or sometimes they're thinking they're scoring points. If it was a real person behind the fake profile, thinks he or she is scoring points, thinks they're getting to me, and maybe they are because I'm talking about it now. But the reason I'm talking about it now is because there are a couple of constructive ways to look at that sort of thing. And as I endeavor to grow the podcast, I realized I better be prepared for that. Growing the podcast means growing in attention. It means having more eyes on it, more ears on it. And most of that will be very positive and very supportive and very encouraging attention. But it will also bring out the trolls. And so as you grow anything publicly, you need everybody needs to be prepared for the eventuality that you will be noticed. You will be noticed by positives. You will be noticed by negatives. The skeletons will come out, man. Something I had not really considered before, because my interactions vis-a-vis this podcast have been almost entirely positive. supportive, encouraging, and that's because they're coming from my friends. They're coming from my friends and my family. You are the audience for this thing, and so you're very encouraging, and that's great. Growing means being in front of strangers, and there are strangers out there, real or not real, fake or genuine, who are just bitter a-holes or think they're winning by being jerks online. And you will attract them because anything popular attracts them. And you need to be prepared for that. So I look at it like, okay, here's a bit of training, right? Here's a warning shot. That's good to note. I didn't get upset about this. I thought it was kind of funny. But the thing is, you can look at it like, I'm in the game. Here's the proof that I'm in the game. Because you do not attract this if you're not in the game. You know what I mean? And it can be destructive. All right? It can be aggressive. It can be violent. It can be virulent. It can be a Bruegel painting come to life. And the thing is, I don't want you to not do your thing because of it. And I know that that's a temptation. And as it gets worse, the temptation only gets stronger. I'm thinking of Blind Boy, the Blind Boy podcast, which I love so much. You should be listening to the Blind Boy podcast if you're not. And he talked recently about how his mental health is affected by this kind of stuff, because Blind Boy's whole shtick is he wears a bag on his head. He wears a plastic bag on his head. That is his character. Okay, it goes back to his time in the band The Rubber Bandits, which was a comedy kind of hip-hop thing. And their shtick was they wore bags on their head, and that was their characters. Blind Boy Boat Club, and here's the bag on my head. But as The Rubber Bandits ended, Blind Boy carried on in a professional creative sense as this character, Blind Boy, and the trademark is the bag on his head. So when he's out publicly doing live podcasts, he wears the Blind Boy bag. That's the character, right? Like Satchel's wig in Steel Panther or Papa's mask in Ghost. He wears the bag on his head. And he recently did an episode where he interviewed the President of Ireland. President of Ireland is not the main leader of Ireland, but is a highly placed representative. Did you wear the bag, Blind Boy? Yeah, he did wear the bag. And so he took a lot of stick for that. How dare you buffoon in a bag? How dare you show up at the residence of the President of Ireland wearing a bag on your head, you disrespectful, self-indulgent a-hole. This is the sort of vitriol that comes at him. Thing is, President of Ireland's a huge fan of his podcast, asked to be on the freaking show, knows very well what Blind Boy's deal is, right? But the vitriol, and he talked about, Blind Boy did, about how much hate he gets. And he gets DMs from people that say you should kill yourself. You know what I mean? And just the relentless hate and attacks that come from these bots, come from these people, come on these platforms that reward this kind of aggressive antisocial behavior. You gotta be ready for it, man, but it does not come to you unless you're in the game. And I don't know what it's like for kids. I don't know what it's like for high school kids who get bullied via these platforms. It's freaking horrendous, and I don't know how you deal with that. And I hope that footballers have the training to know to stay away from the freaking comments, because what I see as a football fan, as an Arsenal fan, you know, the abuse that these players take, the abuse that they take online from people who lose perspective on the fact that these are human beings, you know, not avatars. It's unbelievable, the level of violence that gets directed at these folks. And then in the crowd, I mean, I've been in crowds where, my goodness, people have gone up and down. The players lining up to take corners, just the things that get said to them. And the fact that they can let that roll off them, you know, that's part of being a professional. And they're prepared from the time they're little kids. You know, you join the Arsenal Academy at 7 years old. You're prepared for this eventuality. People are going to be absolute dicks to you in horrendously awful ways. And now that's just amplified. You know, there's no place for a public figure to hide anymore. There used to be, pre-internet, pre-social media, part of the mystique of a celebrity was that you just didn't know much about them and you couldn't get to them. You had no real thought of ever being able to talk to, say, Lionel Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo. Now, you can fire away, man. Go to their social media page and fire away. Most of them block their DMs. But now you've got this recourse, and now you've got people surrounding you who are cheering you on to fight, and agreeing with you and arguing with you. What it opens up in terms of the ways you can attack a person now is really, really frightening, and I don't know that enough is done to mitigate that. But it means you're in the game. It means you're in the arena, man, if you are prepared to handle it. And I wonder sometimes what it's like for these people who go viral. You know, like you're nobody on YouTube. You got a couple of videos that have 60 likes on them. And then you do something that blows you up. And then instantly you got 2 million people talking about you. And a percentage of that 2 million people, does not matter what you do, are going to hate it and hate you. They will do that professionally. And suddenly you're faced with this insane vitriol aimed at you from people who don't know anything about you, people who do not consider you a person but an avatar. That's got to be overwhelming. That has got to be so hard to handle. And I think a lot of these people must crumble from it because you can build up a tolerance. You're like me. You get one snarky comment, you become aware of the potential for that, and you're like, okay, better be prepared. And I've had other snarky comments along the way because I'm not a public figure, but I'm a figure in the public. And so you build up a little bit of tolerance, but it is hard to skew your perspective away from that. Think about TripAdvisor. You go on TripAdvisor because you're looking at a certain hotel or a resort someplace, and there are 300 5-star reviews of that joint, and you only see the one that's a 2-star review. And all of a sudden, that place is out. 2-star review, it's awful. Dude, there's 300 5-star reviews. And the 2-star came from some entitled person who was mad that the person mopping the floor didn't smile big enough. You know what I mean? But we are hardwired by genetics to focus on that negative review, that negative comment, because the negative is a threat. We look for the threat. That is a survival mechanism that goes back hundreds of thousands of years, man. And so we are hardwired for that. And so we miss all of the things that say how great you are, how great what you're doing is. And we focus on that one or two that say, you're a dick, you're stupid, you should kill yourself, because that's where the threat is. And 99.9% of those things aren't threats at all. A lot of them aren't even real people. And it's like they said about Twitter. I don't get too worried about Twitter because Twitter is not a real place. Twitter is not a real place. TikTok is not a real place. Instagram is not a real place. But you're human. You're human. And when you see somebody attack you like that, I'm thinking of other people who have been more violently attacked, more vitriolically attacked. I'm not referring to my little weird comment about shut your mouth. I'm talking about people who come into the real stuff, the real tsunami, man, the real army of skeletons. And you react to that because you're human. And then you need to build up this armor. So what I'm saying to you is be aware that being public, being in the spotlight, putting yourself out there, as I always talk about, will draw a certain amount of negative attention. And you should start now, I guess, building up a certain tolerance to that. Other people are way better at it than me. I'm a sensitive soul, man, want to please everybody, so I take it a little bit hard. Other people are way more evolved when it comes to flipping the literal or figurative middle finger. But it means you're in the game, and you can take from it some encouragement from that. You know, it's very easy to shout from the bleachers, but the person with the real value and the real credibility is in the arena, man. So that's how I treat this troll. This troll online. It's kind of a badge of courage, and if you can laugh about it, that's great. You know, you see these celebrities who read their tweets. I forget which TV show it is, but they'll come on and they'll read the tweets. aimed at them. Just malicious stuff from jerks. And they learned to do it. They learned to let that roll off them, and good for them, because it cannot be easy to do. So I got trolled, and I don't want it to stop me. I don't want it to stop you. I do not want you to hide your light, kids. I do not want you to suppress what is in you to produce out of fear of negative comments from people or negative reactions from people. I know that that's difficult, and you and I will work on that together, okay? I'm just saying it exists, and it was actually kind of funny. I'm not going to dignify the troll, and I don't think the troll cares if the troll is even a real person, because he's on to trolling somebody else now, because that's his life or her life, and what a sad, sad life that must be. I was going to do the Patreon plug 20 minutes ago. Forgot. I'm not great at the Patreon plug, at dropping it in. Very quickly, there is a Patreon page for this podcast, kids. If you're getting something from this, if you are being entertained, if you are being educated, if you are being inspired, if you are encountering new music, new concepts, new painters, learning how to say Bruegel properly, please consider supporting what I'm doing on Patreon, patreon.com/JohnHuffPodcast. $5 a month. I have one tier of membership. What you get for that is my eternal gratitude. You get the private Patreon videos that I've begun to post there. And you can feel as though you are tipping me $1.25 for every episode that I do. Helps me cover my costs. I appreciate your support very, very much. And I appreciate the encouragement that you send. For every troll that comes along, there are many, 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 many more people who offer their encouragement and support. I thank you so much for that. Patreon.com/JohnHuffPodcast. If you would buy me a coffee out there in the world, you can do so virtually, and I do appreciate it. All of a sudden, we're sneaking up on 50 minutes. Didn't know how far I was going to get, but this just feels a lot better than what I recorded yesterday. So I will put yesterday's on my Mulligan shelf. I have 4 or 5 episodes now on the Mulligan shelf. I want you to want me. I want you to want me. That's Cheap Trick, kids. Come on. I'm going to go because I'm getting silly now. I hope you are having a good time. I hope your cockles are warm. I want to thank you for listening this far. Please do drop me a line. If you don't want to support on Patreon, that's cool. Podcast will remain free and accessible where you enjoy fine podcasts. But if you want to help me out for free, consider leaving me a rating and review. That is the thing. You need to, I would request that you encourage people. The trolls are out there trying to pull people down. The trolls and their skeleton army are trying to drive people into that tomb and imprison them there forever. That was clunky. The antidote to that is to support and encourage and inspire. So if you have podcasts that you follow, leave a review for that person or those people. Leave a positive review. Leave some encouragement. Comment on their posts. Share the episodes. You can do that for other people. You can do that for me. You can do that for musicians you like, comedians you like, artists whose work you enjoy. Put the spotlight on that. Do it in a positive way as the antidote to trolls, man. You can find me on Instagram, John Huff Podcast. You can find me for now on TikTok, John Huff Podcast. You can find me on Facebook at the John Huff Podcast. I would appreciate you sharing these episodes. I would appreciate you leaving me ratings and reviews. Warms my cockles, makes me feel good, man. Makes me feel as though what I'm doing is worth doing for you. By that, I mean, from your perspective, this is worth me doing. You're getting something from it. Talking in circles. Just saying it warms my cockles when you say nice things. Please do that. Please share these episodes. Please let me know what you're listening to. Let me know if there's stuff you want me to tackle. Let me know if, any of this is resonating with you. john-huff.com/contact. I'm going to go. I'm going to shutting up because there's some big group stage games coming, and I might just put out some commentary on those games, see if I can't dig up those trolls, man. Until then, thank you ever so much, and I'll check you later. Yeah. want you to want me. I need you to need me. I'm begging you to... Is that the right lyric? Huh.